Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of this We Got This WA webinar. I'm Jane Bilby, Senior Vice President of Operations for the Seattle Metro Chamber. Today, we are focusing on cybersecurity concerns for businesses. The We Got This WA webinar is a series aimed at giving timely updates and practical tools to leaders to steward their businesses through the pandemic. So we're really excited about the topic today and are glad that you're here with us. So first, we want to thank our event partners. This webinar we're partnering with BHT, the Business Health Trust, and also Latitudes Technology Consulting. Both of these organizations they represent two of the Chamber's trusted partnerships, and you can find out more info about them and the resources they offer Chamber members on our website. A few webinar logistics. If you need technical help during the webinar, please use the chat box. If you have questions for the speakers, please use the Q&A function, and we'll make sure to address those questions that you have. We will be recording the webinar and we'll post it on our event page later today. So you don't have to furiously take notes. We'll make sure to have that. So if there's anything you want to come back to, you can do that on your own time and at your convenience. So with that, really excited to introduce our great speakers today. I'm going to introduce all three of our speakers. They're going to be presenting individually, and then there'll be time at the end for Q&A. So we are going to ask that you hold your questions till the end. We are joined today by Alex McDonald with Sophos, Terry McCorkle with FishCloud, and John Reynolds from Latitudes Technology. And like I said, we're going to welcome Alex first. He's going to present, and followed by Terry, and John will present third. Please do hold your questions till the end, but you can also put them in that Q&A box as well, so that we can answer those at the end of the presentations. So with that, Alex, if you want to go ahead and pull up your video and get started. Thank you for joining us. There you are.
Hi, everyone. Gonna share my screen as well. Just a moment while I do that. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for taking the time today. I know most of you, like myself, are working from the comfort of your home, and hopefully it's not too distracting with small children or animals, gardeners outside. We've seen a huge shift in the workforce over the last 3 months of people like myself and probably you working from home. And it's an opportunity for the wrong people. And by the wrong people, I mean wrong organizations like hacker groups. So what I want to talk about today is how common and dangerous hacks and how important cybersecurity is, especially during a pandemic while people are working from home. So to start, I probably should introduce myself. I've been in the security industry for over 7 years now. I work with a top Gartner leading security vendor called Sophos. We sell across the globe to hundreds of thousands of organizations, and we've been in the security industry for almost 30 years. Because of that, we've built a very robust labs department. And what that is an organization at Sophos that understands where and detects where all the malware is coming from, the new samples of malware. And for those of you on the phone that are wondering, what's malware? So that's just a broad term categorizing viruses, worms, Trojans, next generation threats. As I use the term malware, it really just means computer viruses. So our Sophos Labs organization detects, and this is a stat long before COVID, they detect around 500,000 new types of viruses a day. That's 500,000 samples that we've never, well, 75% of them we've never seen before. They're brand new. Hackers are constantly evolving the types of malware that they're using to get onto business computers and wreak havoc. So during the pandemic, everybody has decided to send their staff home, and people are working now no longer behind the shield of their corporate network. So where someone would normally have a firewall at their edge of the network, a filter to stop some of the threats, they're now on their home network using a home router that they might have gotten from Best Buy. So vulnerabilities, the vulnerability for the average worker now has gone up because they're no longer behind they're no longer within their office, the safety of their office. And that also means IT staff don't have as easy access to them. They may work remote hours because there's, they have to teach their kids while they're at home, so they're doing work at night. But also the corporate culture has changed. As a person working from home, you can really surf the web and feel a little bit more free. So what we've seen in the labs hasn't necessarily been an increase in the number of different viruses we've seen or different malware, but just how people are behaving and the vulnerability. In 2019, 2 out of 3 organizations fell victim to some kind of cybersecurity attack. And this was done, we found this data done by a survey across all different industries. So whether it was education, government, retail, finance, the statistics were the same. Organizations were getting hit with some kind of cyber attack, which really means it could shut down computers, shut down servers. Hackers ultimately want to steal data. They want to hold data ransom. So one of the subsectors of malware is called ransomware, which has probably been in the news for the last several years, 4 or 5, since the big ransomware attack globally called WannaCry. So the first key thing finding from the survey is that respondents it was very common that they were hit with attacks. And I think you don't hear a lot of that in the news. They're so common now that most people will just report it to their local, their IT person or their service desk and try to address the problem right away. But while people are working from home right now, I think even less attacks are being reported, and it's becoming more and more common that hackers are able to exploit users while they work at home. So where are all the threats coming from? I mean, mostly our labs are seeing it from email, and I'm sure everybody on this call today is thinking about all the spam and fake phishing attacks that they've seen over the last couple months around COVID, stimulus checks. So hackers are using those new samples of malware, and they're hiding it within URLs in emails they're sending out, or attachments they're sending out, and they're using context that we all want to click on. And they're doing it as simple as just saying, here's something from the state of Washington government or CDC, or, here's something from the federal government on stimulus checks. And the knee-jerk reaction for most people is to click on that. while you're working from home, you can't necessarily turn to your peer and ask them, hey, did you get this email? Does it look a little funny? So that's definitely caused a lot more attacks that we've seen. From spam alone, we've seen about 10 to 50 times more attacks through that vector. And this breaks down the type of attacks that happen after someone clicks on spam. So if you click on a URL within a bad email, there's a variety of different ways a hacker can compromise your computer. And really the most common one is ransomware. So ransomware, for those of you who don't know, encrypts files that are on your device, and then the hacker will send a message saying, pay Bitcoin to recover these files. So that is one of the most common types of attack we've seen. And what's even more unbelievable is that 1/3 of the people hit by ransomware, their organizations end up paying the ransom because they don't have the proper backups, the recovery methods in place. So this is, again, I lead back to everybody working from home, and this is becoming more common with, while organizations have moved their infrastructure quite quickly to a work from home environment, security and the correct backup and recovery methods have not necessarily been put in place. So hackers are having a good time making a lot of money. So this data was taken from August 2019. I don't have a current slide with the latest, but I would imagine these numbers have gone up. So the hackers use a variety of different methods to compromise a device and get onto the corporate network, compromising potentially other devices that your coworkers are using, and ultimately to get onto the servers where the majority of the data and the most important proprietary information of your organization is held. So why are they doing it? Well, it's monetized. Hackers are making over $3 billion a year in the US alone. And that is from holding data ransom, it's from all sorts of stealing proprietary data and selling it, stealing credit card information, healthcare information, financials from customers. There's also just the types of phishing and email texts that are more social engineering. So they convince victims to send gift cards or copy and paste, scratch the back off an Amazon gift card and send it to them because a hacker might email someone and say, hey, this is the CEO and it's disguised extremely well. I need 5 iTunes gift cards. Can you please scratch the back off them and tell me the serial numbers for those gift cards? And your immediate thought is probably like, well, that seems way too obvious. But because hackers are using very advanced tools and disguising themselves very well, and it might just be a small letter change in the email address, but it's very well polished, people tend to listen to what their CEO asks and don't think twice. So this has been very lucrative for hackers. And again, this is data from a year or two ago. If I were to pull up stats real time from our labs, we'd see a much higher number. So the attack surface is exponentially larger. So that means it's really easier for hackers to compromise corporate data, and they can do so because people are working from home. They're using cell phones to write work emails, their personal devices, and laptops and computers. So there's just a broader attack area for hackers to go after. And often corporations don't have visibility to what their staff are doing, especially right now. So someone might be using a personal device at home because they're working from home. And they're like, oh, I'm just going to log into my corporate email on my wife's computer today. That computer may not have the proper security and recovery and backup applications in place. So they're now using corporate applications and accessing corporate information on a device that's really not secure. Makes it a lot easier for hackers when people are taking shortcuts like that. But also hackers are really becoming more sophisticated. So back to the first slide about the number of new attacks they're doing every day. They're really adjusting the virus. So traditional antivirus products don't detect it. That's what's called zero-day threats, and they're exploiting legitimate applications because users don't have the latest software on their computer. They don't have the latest Microsoft suite. They haven't done the updates. They're no longer at the corporate office. They may not be following the proper patching policies. And when that happens, hackers are able to look for, as new updates and new patches come out to repair legitimate applications like Microsoft, hackers will look at the old applications and find out where the vulnerabilities were. They'll exploit those applications and use that as a backdoor to get on a user's computer. So while people are working from home, they may not be patching as frequently as when they were at the office. So a common thing we're seeing is companies increasing their insurance, which is not a bad thing, but there is a consequence to do that, because as companies increase their cybersecurity insurance, the insurance companies, when there is a breach, will encourage companies to pay the ransom. And that way they can charge more for insurance, they can sell more insurance, and it's a vicious cycle. If you're a hacker, you're going to want to go after an organization with insurance because you're likely to get paid because the insurance companies are going to repay the companies. So that's not the key solution. It's definitely a part of what you should do to protect your business. But we've seen an inverse, we've seen a bad consequence from people just going out and buying the biggest insurance policies because all of a sudden they have a bigger target on their back. Hackers know that that organization will be able to pay the ransom. So a big challenge for customers, and this is pre-COVID, is just really to find the proper software to protect their corporate devices, their corporate network, both at the firewall level and corporate malware protection at the endpoint level. And by endpoint, I mean laptops, desktops, mobile devices, just anywhere you have corporate information on a device. So there's a lot of options in the market to get security, but then having the right tools that are simple to manage can be overwhelming. So you can afford the right tools, great, but then managing them and then having visibility, making sure that these right tools are used properly, they're installed on staff's devices, the staff that are working from home aren't tampering with them, trying to uninstall them. And then, of course, having talent on your IT team to manage those tools. So once you're confident that you have the right layers of security in place, you still need the right people to manage those tools. So these are all challenges to the advanced hackers that are out there that have the right tools on their side, the motive to do it with the ransomware and people paying the ransom, that $3 billion price tag, and then also having very intuitive cyber criminals across the world, Russia, China, you name it. So really, nothing has changed in the last 3 months in how we've gone about promoting security. You know, though people are working from home, our stance is still the same, that you want a tool and a team of people or a person to help protect your environment, detect potential threats or zero-day threats, and then the right person to respond to that, and the right tools to respond to that. So this is where I quickly talk about how Sophos is doing things. So we have a variety of layers of security that can be bought a la carte or as a suite. We pride ourselves in offering security as a system out of an easy to manage cloud dashboard, applications that install on devices or set up a firewall, a Sophos firewall, and all of these layers of security are easy to use. They're very intuitive. They have artificial intelligence built in to look for suspicious behavior for those zero-day threats and unknown malware that we've never seen before, and a very light footprint for the staff that have Sophos installed on their computers and phones, because of course we don't want to compromise performance and be intrusive for somebody who's working from home. They don't want to be bothered.
Great. Alex, thank you so much. We're going to transition over to Terry to make sure that we still have time for Q&A at the end, but we can send out these slides afterwards so that folks can definitely look at that last slide and see if those products and learn more about that. So thank you so much. I am going to introduce Terry McCorkle from Fish Cloud. Terry, if you'd like to, Alex, if you can bring your slides down, and Terry will share his, and we'll move on to the next section. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
Great. Looks like Terry's slides are up. And Terry, you may need to unmute yourself as well.
There we go. Sorry about that, everybody.
There you are. Great. Thanks for joining us, Terry. Looking forward to your presentation.
No, thank you. First of all, thank you to the Chamber for inviting us to present. This is exciting for us and happy to be here. I'll start with a little bit of my background, just so you can get a sense of where we're coming from with this presentation. So I've spent about 20 years in cybersecurity. About 12 years of that, I was actively in an information warfare squadron or working at Fortune 500 companies, helping them protect and also find the vulnerabilities that they had in their environment. So I was an Air Force Red Team leader, and essentially what that means is I was lucky enough to be able to travel the world, hack into military installations and other organizations as an assessment to give them an idea of here's how an attacker might approach your environment or your facility. Now, one of the things that we always saw when we were doing these assessments is that phishing worked. It worked almost every time, and we'd get in on a regular basis using that. So we see the same thing publicly. I'm going to dive into some of the reasons why and some of the protective mechanisms that you can actually use. I do want to share one story here before I go on. One of the reasons that we formed PhishCloud was because many users out there today are stuck in a situation where they don't necessarily know what they should click on, what they should open, how they should approach the internet. And they've been trained by organizations. When we were doing our assessments, I had many occasions where we would get in and I'd have somebody that knew that they had clicked on something, they knew they made a mistake, and they were asking for help, but they were not getting it. And that's because teams are overworked and many other things. My passion right now is to make sure that we are enabling and empowering people to help solve phishing. Technology can help us a lot, but people need to really help with the rest of that. On the screen, you see the official definition of phishing. If you go to Wikipedia or many other sites, this is kind of the accepted. What phishing really is an attempt to trick somebody by preying on their emotions. They're going to use your emotions. They're going to get you to either open a file, click on a link, enter your credentials, or try to trick you into doing something that you would not usually do. That's really what phishing is. It's being used today to bypass the existing security controls that you may have in place. That bypassing security controls using people or actually targeting people has been done for years. This is not a new thing. It's been being done since the history of civilizations. But now we've got the internet and other connected ways of being of working together. And so they're exploiting these same kinds of flaws by going and working through people and using those to attack the companies. As the representative from Sophos was saying, we've had many different ways that people are attacked. This is an example of a phishing attack that goes out to many different organizations on a regular basis, trying to get them to click and provide their credentials. So if you go in here, it's going to pop up and it's going to look like a login screen, or it'll open a document that will take you to a login screen. They've got different ways that they'll approach that. COVID, we saw an over 300% increase in phishing attacks that came as part of that. Now, keep in mind that 300% increase actually happens anytime there is some way to exploit people. We had a pretty unique situation here with everybody being impacted at once. So they throttled it up. Between 300 and 600% increase, it really worked for them. They made a lot of money. And you know, these sort of attacks actually work. The link here actually goes to another website. So they're using tricks like taking pictures of links and using an image so it looks legitimate, or they'll actually hide the link behind it with hypertext. So there's different ways that they can go about this. One of the things to keep in mind though about phishing is it's not just an email problem anymore. Many people talk about it from an email perspective, but keep in mind that as you train people or as you're thinking about this, phishing is happening on just about any communication medium that we have today. It comes in via LinkedIn, via social media, and then once they get into organizations, they'll even use your team chat to go send it out to your teammates so that they can try to get additional people in the organization. So really what phishing really equates to is they're trying to get somebody to click on something, whether it's a file, whether it's a link, in order to get that breach, in order to get in and potentially steal that data that they may want to get to. So today, the estimate is around 90% of breaches actually begin with a phishing attack. Keep in mind that that phishing attack may have happened months or even years before that, and the attackers are patient. They'll wait. And they'll wait for the right timing. The other key here is businesses of all sizes are being impacted by this. Last year alone, and this is according to the Verizon data breach report, 43% of small businesses had some form of cyber attack against them. So there's not something that delineates you're a small business versus a large business, and therefore you won't be targeted. Every business is being targeted, and the social media volume is increasing as well. So so far this has all sounded, gloom and doom, but I really want people to understand how phishing is working and why it's working. So I'm going to go through a quick case study, something that, this is a small business that we were working with. And these are some of the things that a business can expect to go through if they do have a compromise. So somebody clicks on something, they gave away their credentials. They will log into that person's email box or account, and they will then figure out what their network looks like. They'll target their customers. And the reason they target their customers, they're trying to expand their foothold, right? So target customers, and they'll use either social media or email to do that. And then, as is said earlier, there is that opportunity for them to come in and deploy that ransomware and to really then get people to pay that or use their cyber insurance. So as mentioned, 43% of small businesses face those cyber attacks. There's actually a pretty large cost when those cyber attacks happen. You have things to look at for brand, you have your customers, and actually many of our customers, once they've been phished, a couple months later or a couple weeks even, they'll start getting phished by others. Why would they go after these small companies? It's important to understand that small companies are part of that supply chain. Small companies can be used to get access to big companies, to get emails, to have ins so that you're coming from a trusted source. And when you get to the larger scale, those problems still exist. They're still growing. Larger organizations are spending a lot of time and a lot of money to actually try to deal with phishing. So it's important for everybody to kind of understand what phishing is, how it works, and keep in mind that people are susceptible to click. Everywhere we go, people are like, doctors click on everything, CEOs clicking on everything. Whoever it is, there are people that will click on them. To get into some of the actual statistics around how people click on them, today, actually, I'll go into a little bit around how you can protect yourself from these, and then I'll get into some more of the statistics so you really understand how combined layered methodology to protect yourselves can work. There are a lot of types of email gateways out there. Email gateways will help pre-scan. They help protect from spam and other things that exist. So you do want to have some form of a filter on your email or on your network as it's coming in, so you can try to detect them there. The next piece is always make sure you train your employees. They need to understand what phishing is, that it's attempting to target them, and it's important to understand that it works. So since 2012, when most of the phishing training started, the click rate's actually down 21%, which is really good. But the lowest people have been able to get it, even in the best organizations, is around 3%. So there's still a threat. Implement some two-factor authentication. Most companies that you're going to work with today for authentication will have a two-factor authentication capability. So even if one of your employees does click on something, there's a lower likelihood that somebody's going to be able to actually compromise them. Keep in mind that there are attackers that can fake two-factor authentication now. So that is something they can get past, but it's a harder attack. SPF, DKIM, and DMARC are technologies that let you actually have, the controls in place to encrypt and to actually make sure you're securing your email as well. So they'll actually use authentication to make sure that it's coming from a trusted source. They'll let you encrypt it to prove that it hasn't been tampered with. So there are technologies that can let you get down to that level. Number one thing, though, is to have a response plan. You need to understand that these attacks do happen, and you need to talk to the employees about how they happen and what their role is going to be if it does happen and how they need to respond. Next one. So when you apply this layered approach to preventing phishing, email gateways are critical. When you consider that there are 3.4 billion phishing emails going out every day, and those gateways filter many of those, that's fantastic. But there are still around 500 million phishing emails that get into inboxes every day. So that's that 3 to 20%, depending on the gateway technology you may use. That's why it's so critical to train employees. Training employees will make it so a smaller fraction of those links are clicked. And today, the methodology has been to actually have employees forward those onto a security admin or have some kind of process that lets them report that so they can so that they can actually do that. Now, we believe at FishCloud, and I'm just going to summarize here. Basically, the threat is evolving. It's not what it used to be. It's no longer just email, and so we really need to push on some new technologies, and that's where FishCloud came from. We actually created an endpoint solution that helps users see phishing in real time. We do it by highlighting links, and we do it by making the users part of this solution. We've also expanded it so that it can be that this phishing protection can be applied in any application across the desktop. So you can protect against those chat applications. You can protect for users that are being targeted in the browsers and in their email as well. Continue training. Employees and people need to continue learning about this as the threat evolves. And really, it comes down to how do we stop many of these criminal organizations that are out there working to compromise people and steal the money from both governments and organizations as well. And you need to make sure you've got visibility into what's going on in that environment. Who is receiving emails that may be bad, who clicked on emails that may be bad, so you can respond quickly. And that needs to be done as an ongoing process. So that's our approach at FishCloud. We're happy to help, and I believe we've got one more speaker, and then we'll get into questions. I saw the questions scrolling through. Happy to come back and speak to anything that you guys have for us. And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry. Really appreciate that presentation. I am going to move over to John Reynolds, who's going to give us a brief presentation, and then we'll move over into Q&A as well. I know there are some really good questions, so looking forward to getting some of those answered for you all. John? Oh,
thanks, Jane. And thanks to Terry and Alex. That was a great presentation. So my name is John Reynolds, and I'm the Director of Operations for Latitudes Technology Consulting. We're a local managed service provider and consultancy company that have worked quite closely with the Chamber over the last few years to develop out some of their internal services and tools, as well as work with their membership in trying to kind of provide services for members around IT, technologies and processes. So we've heard a lot about the tools from the last two speakers, from Terry and Alex. So what I thought it might be interesting to do is perhaps speak about some of the conversations that I have and guys at Latitudes have had with some of our customers, some of our clients, and also Chamber members around the security concerns, especially in light of COVID. And perhaps just in a more broad sense, moving away from the actual kind of technology implementations, but perhaps some of the positive steps that companies can make to really kind of address some of the concerns that cybersecurity in over the next kind of 12 months. One of the things that we've really focused on in these conversations with our customers and members is essentially the message that you shouldn't take your foot off the gas. Trying to maintain a good level of security hygiene, best practice architecture around cybersecurity, and really try to maintain that level of sophistication that you were trying to achieve prior to COVID. So one of the reason I mention that is that one of the concerns that I've been noticing is that, especially on the adoption rate for new technologies and bringing in new tools to deal specifically with COVID-related needs, has tended to perhaps bump down the priority stack for cybersecurity. I think that's probably it's probably a mistake, although I can accept that that's probably going to happen. But I think that readdressing and making sure that you are still focused on good architecture, good security practices, and really keeping and maintaining that priority. Another kind of broader conversation that we have with our customers is trying to leverage different tools to maintain good communication with staff, and keeping them up to date with security practices, best practice architecture, and essentially what they do on their endpoint devices. I know Alex mentioned that one of the things that he's noticed, or Sophos has noticed, is that you don't have that ability to walk over to one of your colleagues and be able to, hey, did you get this email, and does this look right to you? So I think that maybe dialing up the communication part and keeping your folks really engaged in cybersecurity is probably is a really good time to do that. The other conversations we've had is really about starting to think about extending out the cybersecurity model, the in-house business cybersecurity model to the home network. Again, Alex touched on this, but I think that really starting to get your IT professionals, whether that's whether you're working with an MSP or you have an in-house team, but really starting to think about that home network as being an adjacent extension of your corporate network, and the particular challenges with dealing with that. We've dealt with many companies that are taking a very hands-off approach, and perhaps even implementing technologies that kind of mitigate that risk, using remote desktop services, using Citrix or thin client kind of technologies. But we've also seen companies move towards having more of a extension kind of architecture, where they're essentially extending out the home network into the corporate network. So I think that perhaps having useful conversations about that with your IT professionals is going to be really beneficial. I also think that in general, IT departments and perhaps operational departments should be looking to perhaps engage more with their staff in terms of their staff and their employees' perspective around cybersecurity. So what I mean is that rather than just focusing on some of the kind of corporate technologies that they would be perhaps using on a day-to-day, and making sure that they're using them in a really meaningful way, but perhaps digging into how they manage their own passwords. That could be anything from Pagliati's Pizza to their Chase Online account. How do they manage that? Giving them the tools that they can extend out the cybersecurity model that you're trying to lay in the corporate environment, but bringing it down to the home environment. I think it's really important to treat the employees treat the technology, or treat the employees as an extension of their overarching technology features, rather than just concentrate on what you have in terms of the office. A couple of technologies that I think are really kind of important to view and look at the moment are endpoint encryption. I know that Sophos has an offering for that. These devices now are becoming scattered. You have devices at home, you have devices in the office that are not being used very often, and the assets are starting to move around in a more fluid way. So I think that perhaps looking at an all-encompassing technology to encrypt all those devices is almost becoming a standard rather than a best practice architecture. The last thing I'd like to mention is perhaps a focus, and maybe having some breathing space now to focus on IT documentation, and especially password management. It's something that there's no one technology that you can plug in and it will just fix that. But I think that having a methodology where you are controlling that documentation, you're retasking your IT professionals to maintain that documentation, maintain that password infrastructure, because I think it certainly addresses a lot of the fluid kind of changes that you're having with your personnel. And also as well, it means that you have a structured manner in which you don't find that, users who are now desperate and spread across, the globe are emailing passwords to each other, putting them in Slack channels and whatnot. So I think having just a basic password vault would be a really good asset to most SMBs and frankly most mid-market and enterprise companies as well. Jan, I'm going to pass it back over to you, if I may.
Yeah, and that was a great transition, John. So mentioning the password vault is, if there were to be, you know, something that I struggle with as somebody who oversees IT for an organization is there's so many things to pay attention to, and there's so many products, and there's so many different ways to spend the money that you have budgeted for that. If you were to recommend one single security product type that would benefit companies, especially given the pandemic, what would you say? Would that be that password vault? Is there something else that would be something that you think every business really should have at the core of their IT program?
I think there's, I mean, I certainly think there's lots of technologies that most companies would benefit from to, you know, to an extent. But I think that one of the, I hate to say magic bullets, but I think that one of the most important things is something that Terry touched on, and that's end user training. I think the investment in technology is fantastic, and there are obviously technologies that help with that training and help with that user education program. But I think that realistically, they're, you know, pulling dollars into that has you're getting so much more bang for your buck. I mean, most technologies that deal with that kind of end user training, phishing simulations, are really geared towards just adding a lot of benefit to the end users at a really a very cheap price point, considering what the ramification costs can be.
Great. And on that note, do you think businesses should be looking, and this is for any of the panelists, but do you think that businesses should be looking to increase their budget for cybersecurity over the next 12 months? And what is the kind of business case for making that argument to their business leaders if it's not them, or for rationalizing it at the, you know, bottom line?
Yeah, I can tackle that. This is Alex from Southwest speaking again. I obviously am biased. I strongly encourage an increase in security budget, but I know budgets are tight right now across all industries. I think whatever an organization decides to do is focus on using that money wisely and investing in the right, as John's point, educational tools to train people so they don't make the wrong mistakes, but also having a very, very good value and shopping smartly and listening to John, if he's your consultant, on what products are the best bang for your buck. So you can get a very good product without spending a fortune. And the reason why I think it's important to spend money on security is because if you don't, and there is a breach, it could cost you so much more than investment in a software license. So if your consultant, an MSP, is proposing a security bundle that costs X number of dollars, and you're on the fence of whether you want to spend that money or spend it elsewhere, the ramifications of a breach could be 10 times that of what the security bundle might cost. So, you know, let's use some actual numbers. If there is a ransomware attack that spreads across multiple devices and servers, it could shut business down for several days, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost business. And hindsight's 20/20. And if you thought to yourself, well, maybe I should have just bought that Sophos agreement for $10,000, for example, you would have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's the trade-off.
Thanks. Yeah, and not just lost business, but also reputation, right? I think we're seeing a lot of big employers who are leaving data of their consumers to be easily accessed and stolen, and that can really impact their brand reputation too as well. So I think that's a really good call out as well. The Chamber recently invested, Latitudes has helped us, we've done a lot of employee training on phishing and other kind of ransom and all of that. I'm clearly still getting familiar with all of it, but we have seen a huge uptick in reportings of spam and a drastic decrease in how often those happen or folks click on any links. It's been really, really inspiring to see how employees really do like having that information, and they respond well, and they are better protecting the organization with that training and information. So that's, I think, a really good tip. What is, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just to jump in there really quickly.
Do.
One of the things that I know we've seen, and the reason that we're taking the approach we are is because the training is really good and it works. Many organizations are right now are trying to figure out how do you build a better security culture within the company so that people feel comfortable reporting those things. And I think the culture is a critical piece to this as well. And John mentioned this a little bit as well. And now Jane, you're bringing that up too. So it really becomes something where you want to be much more inclusive about security. I've seen different aspects to this. Some organizations will slap an employee's hand if they clicked on a link, or they'll get in trouble, or they'll get put on the bad kid list. The problem with that, or the challenge with that, is it actually discourages people from helping with this situation. And with the current environment, the biggest thing you can do is make sure your employees know that if something is going on, here's how you handle it, here's how you report it, and here's how you get access to the resources you need to help the company recover quickly. So those sort of things become really critical here. And I think if you invest, antivirus is definitely critical. Those gateways, the firewalls, definitely critical, but so is your culture. So make sure you put some focus on that.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, make everyone feel responsible for protecting the organization. I think that's a really good, bringing people along rather than being punitive. I think that's a really good piece of advice for those listening. Thank you. Speaking, I think we might have time for one more question. And so I wanted to pose this out. And John, since you work with a lot of small businesses on supporting end users, what has been the impact of so much more working from home, and what can businesses be thinking about with all of their employees being so remote, and supporting them both from a cybersecurity perspective and just IT generally as they're working from home?
Well, I mean, we keep reasonably detailed analytics around the incidents and issues that we come across from end users. So we get a very good sense of the time allocation, time on ticket, quantity of tickets, where the types of issues that we're seeing. And surprisingly, over the last kind of 6 to 8 weeks, we've actually seen a significant drop in the number of incidents that are being reported by end users. That I actually think is not a great sign. And I also think that that's perhaps a slight level of disengagement from end users, insofar as they are becoming, and this is a massive assumption on my part, but it's one of the only reasons that I can explain that massive kind of drop off. This is, by the way, this is industry wide. We're a member of an MSP group that's an international MSP group. So this is actually being seen worldwide. Essentially, the number of tickets is falling, and it's falling dramatically. The sense I get is that people are becoming less as they're becoming more remote, they're becoming perhaps less engaged with perhaps interacting with technologists and IT professionals to fix the problems they have, or simply just becoming perhaps more apathetic towards the issues that they perhaps have ongoing. So I think that one thing to perhaps take away that isn't necessarily cybersecurity related, but I think it's perhaps from a business perspective, is to make sure that your staff are engaged, and they know that there is a technology professional that's there to help them. There is an infrastructure that they can lean on, and these issues, should they come about, shouldn't go untreated, as it were.
And can I just jump on really quickly there, John? I think you pointed out something really important. The numbers drop there, but it is, I think in the way I'm looking at it, is deceiving as well. Because we're talking to organizations and they're saying since they went home, since people started working from home, they're seeing up to a 20% increase in click rates that they've been testing as well. So because people are more complacent. So that combined with what John was saying, I think it really becomes something that we need to make sure we're getting better and paying attention to engaging the people, and they know that this is still a threat even if you're at home.
Great. Well, thank you all, Alex, Terry, and John, for joining us and providing all this really great information. I think their businesses are able to leave with some really good tactics and references and resources. To those listening, thank you so much for joining us. As we mentioned, this was recorded and will be on the website, as well as we'll be sending out a follow-up email with some more information for you to be able to reference as well. We do want to encourage you to continue to look at the We Got This WA webinar series page for more webinars coming soon with other tips and tricks on other content areas. So please join us again. Thank you all for being here and have a lovely afternoon.